Welcome to Weapons of Beam Destruction Podcast, episode 223, which can be found at WMDpodcast.com/223. You can get the audio only on any podcast catcher, and you can get the video on YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey, and X. David.
Sir.
How you doing?
I'm
Just happy
alive.
to be here.
Yeah, just, it's been a week. It's been a week.
It has been a whole week since stuff happened. Celebration of sorts is in order. Bitcoin finally broke above $100,000 a coin.
Hey.
Are we celebrating that?
Congratulations to all you Bitcoin holders. That
it's a milestone in world history, if nothing else.
I mean, yeah, it's definitely there.
So
I told you to listen to that Mark and Treason podcast, but I doubt you listened to me. But he likes Bitcoin. He's a big fan of it, so to speak, and he had some interesting things to say on it. But I'm glad that it's not being withdrawn anymore and it's not being held back. So, because, in the land of the free and the home of the Whopper, it's supposed to be free.
Yeah. Your money is supposed to be your money. I thought that was
Use it when you need it. JG Wentworth.
I thought that was
877 cash now. Sorry.
I thought that was a pretty foundational principle of freedom, is that, the fruit of your labor should belong to you and you alone. So,
and your loins as well.
Anyway, that's not what we're talking about. As exciting of a topic as that is.
We're not talking about our loins here?
We are not talking about our loins.
What about tender ones?
No, not even the tender ones.
Damn it.
Anyway. We are talking, ladies and gentlemen, about the presidential pardon of Joe Biden, of Hunter Biden by Joe Biden.
Shocker.
And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking,
who had
guys,
that on their bingo card, huh? Who had that?
You're thinking, guys, okay, by the time you're seeing this episode, it will have been about a week since that happened. And you're thinking, guys, what's the big whoop? Okay?
What is big deal?
This horse has been, sufficiently beaten. Leave it alone. It's a non-starter. It's a non-story. We've seen everything Rachel Maddow and Fox.
You don't know this horse like we do.
Have had to say about it. What's the big deal?
We can change them.
I can assure you, there are big deals. So what we're going to do, since it's
huge deals,
since it's a pretty short statement from the president, we're going to read it in full, and just kind of have our comments about it. But when we get to the point that we think is important, you won't be surprised. We'll slow down a little bit and really get into the weeds on that part. So without further ado, let's get into Joe Biden's statement on the pardon of his son. So Joe has this to say in his statement as of December 1st, 2024. He says, "Today, I signed a pardon for my son, Hunter."
Pause. Do you think he wrote this himself?
Absolutely not.
Is there any chance that he wrote this himself?
Absolutely not. Way too coherent.
Is there any hairy legs in here? Or
no.
Anything like that? Or does he calls anybody a dog-faced pony liar or anything like that?
Nope, none of that.
It doesn't have any of the hallmarks of Joe then. I call this bullshit. I think this is plagiarism.
No kid sniffing, none of that.
Oh, damn.
So, today I signed a pardon for my son, Hunter. From the day I took office, I said I would not interfere with the Justice Department's decision-making, and I kept my word, even as I have watched my son being selectively and unfairly prosecuted. So this is obviously Joe or Joe's ghostwriter trying to front-run the accusations that he lied when he previously said
that he wasn't guilty as fuck.
That I'm not going to pardon my son.
Well, I mean, that statement I hear is like, oh, they hunted him down and just, came up with something, kind of like what they did with Trump in New York. But they made it sound like this was some kind of witch hunt, McCarthyism. Like, Joe, your son took pictures of himself with a hooker and smoking crack,
illicit substances
with a gun in his hand, sir. Like, that's not, you can't just say I would have appreciated it more. Again, honesty is not a part of this particular cabinet's wheelhouse. I would have respected this pardon a hell of a lot more if he just came out and said, you know what? My son's a bit of a fuck up. Who can relate, right? So anyway, I'm going to let him off the hook because what else can I do? He's my fucking son. So anyway, back to you, Dave.
And to be honest, I
would have respected that a hell of a lot more than whatever bullshit, flowery language we're going to hear about how your son likes smoking crack and fucking hookers.
I mean, and to be
Who
honest,
doesn't, by the way?
you know, as a parent, I don't even think you need to be a parent to understand the sort of love between a parent and a child. That it's almost, there's nothing they could do that you wouldn't forgive them for. I don't think there's that many people that are so, on their moral high horse that they would say, nope, not me, never in any circumstance. If my son did that, I wouldn't pardon him. You're lying to yourself. Yes, you would. So that part we can't even get mad at him about. I'm not even so mad about him
Not
lying.
even salty.
Or, about him saying, he should have never said in the first place, like, I'm not going to pardon my son.
Just say, we'll see what happens.
Just stand on business. Say, yeah, if they convict my son, I'm going to pardon him. What's the point of being president if I can't save my own flesh and blood?
What, am I not going to get a blowjob in the Oval Office? Fuck off. It's the whole point I'm here, guys.
All right, David's
sultry Monica Lewinsky blowjob. It can't be an attractive one. It's got to be an
David's
ugly
motivations are slightly different. But listen,
Wait,
most people aren't going to blame him.
Is that not what everyone runs for? I'm sorry.
That's what Bill ran for.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, that's, they're just trying to throw the red meat out there, get you to focus on that first. More on that when we get to the juicy part. So he continues, quote,
you say all those things after the blowjob talk, huh? You say all of it after the blowjob.
The important stuff is buried directly after the blowjob talk. Back to the statement. He says, quote, without aggravating factors like use in a crime, multiple charges, or buying a weapon as a straw purchaser, people are almost never brought to trial on felony charges solely for how they filled out a gun form. Those who were late paying their taxes because of serious addictions, but paid them back subsequently with interest and penalties, are typically given non-criminal resolutions. It is clear that Hunter was treated differently.
Maybe he should review that bill he wrote back in 1994 about smoking crack and whether or not it's legal in this particular United of States or not, and how many people were sent to jail because of that.
And what he said on the floor of the Senate when he advocated for that bill about the people who engage in crack consumption, distribution, et cetera, et cetera.
Life is a fickle thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Life is a fickle thing, isn't it? Only 40 years later. No, I'm sorry. 30 years later.
Not such flowery language from Joe.
Wait, hold on. Yeah, 30 years. Yeah. Only 30 years later, those names that you're using for those particular addicts, you should use for your son that you're pardoning.
Exactly.
And I wonder if any of their fathers would have pardoned them for smoking crack.
Yeah.
You think, Dane?
So, no shocker, hypocrisy abounds. Anyway, paragraph 2 of the statement. He continues, quote, the charges in his case came about only after several of my political opponents in Congress instigated them to attack me and oppose my election. Not because he literally filmed himself doing everything he was doing.
And then just dropped his computer off at a random ass IT place and never came to pick it back again. I know what you're going to say, Dane, but that's the behavior of a crackhead. You're right, Dane. It is the behavior of a crackhead. Maybe that crackhead should be served some justice, a little spank on the popo, because whatever Jones doing over there to raise him ain't working. I'll put it that way.
It ain't not. All right. So he continues, quote, then a carefully negotiated plea deal agreed to by the Department of Justice unraveled in the courtroom with a number of my political opponents in Congress taking credit for bringing political pressure on the process. Had the plea deal held, it would have been a fair, reasonable resolution of Hunter's case.
Pause. Can I pause there? So you said that you had successfully subverted justice. It was a fair plea deal. It was a fair settlement. And then all of a sudden, Congress came in and made them do their job. That's interesting, Dane. Don't you think that's interesting? Like, I figured it out for my son, and I had it all figured out. And then all of a sudden, these dickheads came in and actually wanted to go forward with the case because it might be, I don't know, a point of public interest that the president's son is doing all these things.
Well, it's quite hilarious that he characterizes the falling apart of the plea deal as some sort of, political, shenanigans on behalf of Republicans in Congress, when we actually covered what happened in the courtroom on this podcast. We covered it at the time. Yeah. And what really happened is the attorneys went in front of the judge, and Hunter Biden's attorney proceeded to speak and tell the judge that it was just blanket, resolution settlement, that he wasn't going to get any jail time and he wasn't going to be prosecuted for anything ever and for always or whatever. And the DOJ attorney goes, wait a second. That's not what we agreed to. And then all hell broke loose. They started going after each other, and the judge is like, what the hell is going on? And so, this plea deal that he says was worked out with the DOJ apparently was not agreed to at the day that they argued it to the judge, to have it uphold, because apparently Hunter's attorney and the DOJ attorneys had two completely different views of what was being agreed to. So, I find it rather funny that, and again, this is a short statement, so he's not going to go into the weeds about that, but we covered it at the time, and it fell apart because Hunter's attorney thought he was getting a blank check forever. Wink, wink, nod, nod. More on that later in this statement. And that's not what the DOJ attorneys were prepared to agree to. And so the plea deal was removed. The case moved on. Hunter was, eventually convicted of what he was convicted of. So again, even within his own statement, where most of us, like David was saying, would be on the side of, it's your son, we get it. He can't even shoot straight with the American people about, how the process unfolded. Instead, it's like pointing fingers constantly, like my political opponents were after me, which, by the way, what has Biden's, DOJ and, weaponization of the law
and Trump and
exactly,
everyone. Yeah,
exactly.
Talked about the weaponization there. Yeah.
So pardon us for not having a whole bunch of sympathy. Even if what you're saying is true, that it was just political pressure from his opponents that caused the plea deal to fall apart.
If your son would have just stuck to finger painting, we wouldn't be having this fucking conversation now, would we? But no, he had to go and get dirty with a bunch of different people. So, what?
Exactly.
I got no sympathy for the devil here.
Exactly. So next paragraph, Joe continues, quote, no reasonable person who looks at the facts of Hunter's case can reach any other conclusion than Hunter was singled out only because he is my son. And that is wrong. So if you think Hunter filming himself, forming all kinds of illicit activities,
isn't that called self-incrimination?
Lying on a federal form about his gun purchase, et cetera, if you think that is the only reason, is not for all of that, but because he's Joe's son, you are not a reasonable person, according to Joe. So anyway, he goes on. There has been an effort to break Hunter, who has been 5.5 years
by the hookers
sober.
Or by the crack dealer? Which one?
From many different directions, I gather.
Oh, okay. So it's not. Oh, so there's multiple fronts. Okay, good.
Yeah.
It seems like Hunter has his hands in a lot of different pies. Maybe he should just zipper it down all to one. Just focus on that one pie of like, maybe not smoking crack so much, okay? Let's focus on that first, and then we'll put our fingers in a bunch of different pies after that.
Taper it back to once a week or something like that.
Right, maybe just on special occasions.
Having a good Friday night, without your crack pipe.
You know what? And let's start tonight. I'd say being presidentially pardoned is a great time to smoke some crack.
It is cause for celebration.
I mean, shit.
And people celebrate in different ways.
I have an idea of who else might show up to that crack party too. Might be Mr. 9mm and some hookers.
He says that Hunter has been 5.5 years sober. Well, I hear that, and I raise you the phantom
July 4th.
The phantom bag of cocaine in the White House that mysteriously disappeared and nobody knew what happened.
Anybody? They tracked down all the people that walked through the halls on January 6th with their faces covered. No problem. Can't figure that one out. Jesus. With Hunter Biden looking super excited about the fireworks and rubbing his nose. And even Jill Biden's like, get the fuck away from us. You're on camera. Like, hey, everybody good? Everybody good? I got some ideas, Dad. I got some ideas. Like, God, get away. You miserable fuck up.
So he says, quote, even in the face of unrelenting attacks and selective prosecution, in trying to break Hunter, they've tried to break me. And there's no reason to believe it will stop there.
You're fixed?
Enough is enough. For my entire career, I have followed a simple principle.
Go on.
Just tell the American people the truth. Like, I'm not going to pardon my son.
Oh, shit.
Just tell him that.
Yeah, why not? I definitely didn't blow up the Nord Stream pipeline. I definitely graduated ahead of my class. You remember that video from him back in like the 1980s when he was running for president? And he said that he was all these things. He was valedictorian. He was this, that, and the other. And then it came out that he was lying about everything. And in fact, he even plagiarized his fucking speech. His whole, okay.
Yeah.
Everything he does is a lie, which is why he just, and I don't, do you think at this point, Dane, this is just a conversation between us two. Don't let any of the listeners
and the
throw you
same
off.
spacers.
Right, exactly. Do you think that he even feels it anymore? You know, when you tell a lie and you're like looking at the other person like, do you believe me? Are you getting me?
It's like, you know, like they always say with pathological liars, right? They lie so often and about such mundane stuff that they start to believe their own lies. Mm-hmm. I think he's really at that point right now.
I think he is too.
I think he got to that point decades ago, but
I think he's there because the whole fucking apparatus is there.
Yeah.
The Joy Reids and the fucking Rachels and all the ones that you mentioned before.
So anyway, his principle is to just tell the people the truth. He goes on, they'll be fair-minded. Here's the truth. I believe in the justice system, but as I have wrestled with this, I also believe raw politics has infected this process and it led to a miscarriage of justice.
You don't say.
And once I made this decision this weekend, there was no sense in delaying it further. I hope Americans will understand why a father and a president would come to this decision. And it's got the nice little hashtags there. And if you don't scroll anymore, that's the end of the statement. You know, the hypocrisy and the lying aside and the, you know, kind of special pleading on behalf of his son, you know, fudging the facts a little bit. All of that aside, if you stopped at the hash marks, you're like, okay, it's a father pardoning his son. Who, you know,
what did he really do?
What did he really do?
He smoked some crack. He had a gun, enjoyed a couple of hookers' company. Big whoop. Want to fight about it? We've all been to Vegas. Whatever.
Yeah. And, you know, if you watch CNN or MSNBC or hell, even Fox News, that's all you're going to get out of this story. Yep. And that's all there is to talk about.
Nothing more to see here, folks. Nothing more to see.
But this wouldn't be weapons of meme destruction if we didn't have plenty more for you. Because if we keep scrolling here on this official statement, we go down and it's got the sort of official pomp and circumstance. To all to whom these presents shall come, greetings, be it known that this day, blah, 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 right? I, Joseph R. Biden, under my powers, under the Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1 of the Constitution, have granted unto Robert Hunter Biden a full and unconditional pardon. Subscript. Oh, I left my highlights up so you can see which parts we think are important. After that, after the full and unconditional pardon, he says, quote, for those offenses against the United States which he has committed or may have committed or taken part in during the period from January 1st, 2014 through December 1st, 2024.
That's a decade if you're not, keeping track.
That's where we can stop. Because he said he then goes on to say, including but not limited to all offenses charged or prosecuted, including any that have resulted in convictions. And then he's talking about the specific case that, he was convicted in. And all of this that I didn't highlight, that is what was subject at the top. Those are the things that he was convicted for. That's the official case number and everything like that. So that's all at the top. But this part at the beginning, I'm going to read it one more time, especially for the audio only listeners, because
I want you to really focus in on this one, guys.
They don't have the benefit of seeing it. It says, quote, for those offenses against the United States, which he has committed or may have committed.
Who knows? We only have pictures and documented things, but go ahead.
Or just simply taken part in during the period from January 1st, 2014 through December 1st, 2024. Now, let's start with the surface level problems with that.
Good.
First
Please.
of all, it is a blanket, full, and unconditional pardon for an over 10-year period. As a matter of fact, remember when I was just telling you about earlier about why the deal broke down in front of the judge with the the DOJ attorneys is exactly this. Hunter Biden's attorney was arguing to the judge that the pardon was a blanket, unconditional one, and that they couldn't charge him with other stuff if they found stuff that he did wrong later. And the DOJ attorneys weren't prepared to agree with that. That's exactly what Joe's done here. He's given that blank check sort of pardon, but it wasn't just for the things directly tied to what he did in terms of lying on the federal gun form, et cetera, et cetera. It is a blanket pardon for an over almost 11-year period as of January 1st of this coming year of 25, but a nearly 11-year period. He got a blanket pardon for everything he did, he may have done, or even taken part in. Even if he took part in it, but it wasn't technically a criminal offense, he's even pardoned for that. Now, David.
Sir.
Why is that a problem? What's going on with these dates? Why did he pick January 1st, 2024?
Well, wasn't he employed by Burisma, an international Ukrainian energy consortium?
Yep.
And wasn't he getting paid a large sum of money each and every month, $500,000, for a job that he had no credentials for?
Mm-hmm.
And didn't he? Was it during that time that they might have set up, I don't know, labs for specific type of research over there during that time?
Yeah.
And wasn't he having nightly little conversations, little sexts with a member of the CCP during that time too? Because that's a whole decade.
I don't know about sex, but there were some pretty clear extortionist messages being sent of the big guy wants you to do X, Y, or Z, so let's make sure that money keeps flowing. Kind of
so,
thing.
Dane, when you're getting paid $500,000 each and every month, and you're the president's son, and you have no credentials, and you do all these things, first off, is that unprecedented to pardon somebody for an entire decade of possible treasonous, but definitely felonious activities?
Well, I will say this, because I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on the entire, almost 250-year history of American history, and that presidential pardons, if you want to tally up all 46 presidents, have been
kind of makes pardoning Jared Kushner's father look a little mundane, right? A little bit.
So, how many pardons there have been in American history, and what percentage of those pardons have been a sort of like blanket and for a long period, like a 10-year period of time? I don't know. Because you asked the question specifically, is it unprecedented? It may be, I just don't know. I don't know the nature of all the different pardons that have happened in, every different, presidential administration. But I will say this, that it is going to be in a very small minority of pardons. If it has been done before, very few of them are conducted in this way. Usually, you are pardoned for an offense that's already been committed, sometimes that you're already serving sentences for. So, for example, right, we talked a few months ago about one of the big selling points to get libertarians out to vote for Trump was a commitment from Trump that on day one that he would pardon Ross Ulbricht. Well, Ross Ulbricht isn't going to get a pardon, mark my words, for an entire 20-year period of his life, of anything he did or may have done or could have potentially have done. He's going to get pardoned for the specific thing that he was charged and put in prison for. So that's how pardons generally go. Like I said, I don't know how many have gone like this, but I would venture to say not many. And I would also venture to say that not many pardons in American history have been of people that are directly, forget blood related, like immediate members of the family of the sitting president. I'm sure there's been pardons that have gone to business associates and people that, one hand washes the other kind of thing, quid pro quo kind of things handed out. That happens all the time. But for a direct familial tie, your son, that's also a very rare type of pardon. So yes, that's my kind of long-winded answer to your question about whether it has precedential value in terms of this is being done before.
And before we get into the nuts and bolts, the soup to nuts, so to speak, is there anything Trump can do once he gets into office to redact anything that, or not redact, but repeal anything that he was set in motion on this pardon?
No. Presidential pardons are not like executive orders. We talked a lot about executive orders on episode 222. Executive orders are subject to the whim of the then sitting president. So President A can issue an executive order that does one thing, commanding an executive bureaucracy to take X, Y, or Z action. And then President B can come into office in his 4 years and on day one completely reverse that executive order. That's not how pardons work. Once the pardon is issued for whatever the terms of the pardon are, that is set in stone forever. So Trump can't go in and say, I repeal Joe Biden's pardon, and now it's open season on Hunter Biden again if you can find more criminal charges. This is it forever. For that period from January 1st, 2014 to December 1st, 2024, Hunter Biden could have, again, funny bit of a sidetrack. Remember when Trump made that statement during the 2016 election, like I could walk in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and like nothing would happen. And he got drugged to the coal, drug over the coals for saying that. How dare he?
Mm-hmm.
Hunter could have literally done that. Not saying that he did, but he could have literally done that. They could have broadcast him up in Times Square, just mowing a bunch of people down with a car in Grand Theft Auto style, hopping out and just choppering down a whole sidewalk of people. But if it happened during this period, no problem.
If it comes out that he was doing that during this period, we can't retroactively go back and charge him for it now because he's been pardoned for it, correct?
Yeah, and let me caveat what I just said, because I know I'm going to have some lawyers in the same space, correcting me. Well, that's a state crime, and he can still be prosecuted for a state crime. Yes, he could. These are federal crimes. That's the presidential pardon authority only applies to state crimes. So it's the same way with Trump being convicted in the state of New York. President Trump can't take office and pardon himself for that conviction because he was convicted by the state of New York, as opposed to being convicted by the federal government. That's as far as presidential pardons go. So yes, if Trump if Hunter mowed somebody down in the middle of Times Square, he could be charged by New York State. But I'm just using that as a sort of hyperbolic example to say, whatever federal offenses that mowing people down in the middle of Times Square might generate for you, he couldn't be prosecuted for those federal offenses. That's what I meant by that.
But that's, you're mentioning that too.
Wouldn't let me not clarify.
So, it's all right. So it's pardoning Hunter. But as I mentioned the CCP, and you mentioned as well, he mentions the big guy a lot in those WhatsApps to the party member of the CCP, saying that he'll be upset if he doesn't get his money.
Yes.
Quote to the unquote. Not verbatim, but, dictated but not read. But so realistically, Dane, I'm no law. I'm no law, and I don't practice it down here in the South. But it sounds a little bit like Mr. President may have just pardoned himself, no?
Yes, that's exactly what he did. And that's why this January 1st, 2014 start time is key. Because, as David said, 2014, I don't remember the exact time, but in the year 2014 is when Hunter joined the board at Burisma, the Ukrainian energy company, despite not having any expertise in energy production or policy.
Oh, he had expertise in energy, just not in creating it or sending it out. He was very versed in how much energy he gets when he has a certain pipe in his hand.
Yeah.
Or that BDE that he walks in the room with, knowing that he's the fucking vice president's son. I'm sure he had a lot of BDE.
Yes.
But not actual
And as
energy.
far as the biolabs in Ukraine, which again, after Russia invaded, there was this claim from the Russian government that there were American-funded biolabs in Ukraine, and there was sort of the not so tongue-in-cheek suggestion that maybe these biolabs were in some way tied to the creation of coronavirus, or at least the investigation or study of it, because that was the whole point. Remember, we talked, again, contemporaneously about this time during the COVID times, that it was under Barack Obama, under the Biden administration, while Biden was the sitting vice president, it was actually Barack Obama who didn't outlaw, but, it was under his administration where it was outlawed to pursue gain-of-function research on U.S. soil. So what happened was, through Dr. Fauci and the NIH and their grants, they started studying it abroad, including in Wuhan and including other places like these biolabs
So
in
I
Ukraine.
just can't do it on the U.S. soil, you say?
Correct.
Right.
And so 2014 is also the time when an investment firm, again, I want to be clear about these allegations. It's not like Hunter Biden was in
don't worry, Dane. He's never going to be held accountable for it anyway, so don't worry about it. Accuse away.
Well, I don't want to get, slapped with, a YouTube strike at minimum, or
a defamation lawsuit or anything.
Exactly.
How can we defame him more than he's already defamed himself? That's I've got your defense right there. Don't worry about it. We got it covered.
So Hunter Biden had an affiliation with an investment firm, and that investment firm raised money for and invested in a biolab startup called MetaBiota. MetaBiota separately received money from the Pentagon's Defense Threat Reduction Agency for subcontracted work related to biological research labs in Ukraine. So again, I want to take a couple steps back now, because I want to talk about YouTube strikes and censorship and all of that kind of stuff. Because when the Russia-Ukraine war broke out, that's when some of this stuff started happening. And the constant refrain from Rachel Maddow and MSNBC was, if you're talking about biolabs in Ukraine, you are regurgitating Russian propaganda. There are no biolabs. It doesn't exist, blah, blah, blah.
Kind of like when you were racist talking about a lab that studied coronavirus in Wuhan, China.
Yes. Now, I say that to say this. MetaBiota is a biolab that exists in Ukraine. How it's tied to the study of coronavirus or anything else, or just simply the creation of biological weapons, which is internationally illegal. No country is allowed to do that or participate in it, let alone the leader of the free world, the United States. It is a biolab. It is in Ukraine. What it studies or doesn't study, not going to make any claims about that. But an investment firm that Hunter Biden was affiliated was instrumental in raising money to get that biolab established in Ukraine. So, again,
nothing to see here, folks. Nothing to see here. Keep on moving.
Again, I know how that sounds, but the point is that without proving without connecting the dots that MetaBiota was up to criminal activity, that Hunter Biden was involved in it, or at least helped fund it, et cetera, the point of this pardon from January 1st, 2014 is, even if he, and I'm going to go back to the quoted language, if he may have committed, or taken part in any activities that are tied to any criminal activities on the part of MetaBiota or Burisma or any of his other engagements in Ukraine or around the world, Hunter Biden is forever and for always pardoned from any prosecutions for any criminality tied to that.
In an analogous way to protect you, if I'm carrying around a baby, I don't have to tell you the day. I don't have to tell you the week. I don't even have to tell you the month. But if I'm carrying around a baby that looks like me, that has all my mannerisms, you could probably safely say that I had sex at least one time in my life, right?
Yeah. That would be my assumption. I don't know if the baby's yours, but
a leap of logic. I mean, it probably. Right. I mean, if it looks like me, yeah. I mean, carbon copy. But so what we're saying here is you don't have to go too far down a rabbit hole to think that how government works. As we saw with the person that endorsed Kamala Harris, the Dark Lord Oh yeah, Dick
Soros?
Cheney.
Oh.
Dick Cheney. Yeah, no. If you remember back in what was it, 2021 or 2001, 2002, when we kicked off Iraq, there was a little thing called no bid contracts that went out.
Mhm.
We found out about that later, and it went out to a company called Halliburton. And at the time, we were like, Halliburton, that's fucking weird. But people that actually knew shit knew that Dick Cheney was the former CEO of Halliburton. So it would make sense that he was scratching backs over there, hence the no big contract. So if that's how government works in these particular situations, Dane, why would this be so far afield to believe that this may or may not have been tied to the Bidens, or at least Hunter?
I mean, listen, the point is, whether it was or whether it wasn't, no matter what comes out in perpetuity for all the rest of the time, he can't be prosecuted for it. And here's the next shoe to drop is because he is the lead or the principal actor and said, okay, so now we've saved enough for ourselves not to be prosecuted for defamation because we just gave you the facts about Metabiota, but we didn't say that, Hunter was like literally in a lab coat, testing petri dishes. But so that's one side of it is nothing concrete proved yet. But the point of this pardon is that if anything ever does, can't be prosecuted for it. The next shoe to drop is, okay, now let's run with the assumption that he was engaged in criminal activity. Let's say that his Burisma stuff was directly tied to corruption because he was peddling the influence of his then sitting vice president father. And let's assume that Metabiota was in violation of international treaties of all kinds all over the world, studying biological weapons, potentially coronavirus, whatever the case may be. So let's assume that criminal activity was happening. Because Hunter Biden is the principal, any of his co-conspirators can now no longer be charged with conspiracy because they're not directly tied to Metabiota. Joe Biden is not directly tied to Metabiota. Joe Biden is not directly tied to Burisma. Joe Biden is not the one sending text messages to CCP officials in China saying, do what we say or the big guy's not going to be happy. That was all Hunter. So what could have happened is if Hunter would be on the hook for all of those criminal activities, then so would his co-conspirators, including his father. So when viewed through that lens, this is not a pardon for Hunter Biden because of hookers and crack and guns. I mean, it is that. But really what it is it's a pardon for the entire Biden crime family, including Joe himself. This is a pardon for Hunter and the big guy. That's what this is. That's why it's a 10, almost 11-year blanket pardon. That's why it starts in January 1st, 2014, because 2014 is when Hunter became deeply embedded in the Ukraine, pay for play sort of influence peddling that he was involved in from that day forward, and everything else that flowed from that. So whether you think Hunter Biden was engaged with biolabs in Ukraine, or whether you think his board position at Burisma was warranted or not, or whether you think that there's no smoke nor fire to his text message about a kickback for the big guy, whether you think any of that was criminal or not, the point is, if it's ever found to be, if Hunter leaves a laptop around again and, the New York Post doesn't get kicked off of Twitter for trying to bring it up before the 2020 election, somebody digs into that laptop and finds a smoking gun criminal tie between Hunter and those activities, Hunter can never be prosecuted and neither can Joe. And that's what this pardon's about. So even if it's just, oh, it's my son, let he who is without sin cast the first stone. What's the big deal? That's not the big deal. This highlighted portion, these 3 lines of text is the big deal. And its full mask off shows you exactly what your government and the people elected to rule over you think about you. Is they're above the law, always and forever. You are not.
And it's not a huge leap of logic. It's just a basic application of logic to incentives and actions. That's all this is. Like, we've been talking about it for what? Since it came out, probably in 2020. about the Hunter Biden laptop. I think it even came out before the election. They all eschewed it as misinformation. Then it comes out and you start learning about it more and more and more. And I just wanted to kind of caveat it because to let you behind the and we don't have to go into this very much, but it's more of a warning. If the November 5th election of the year of our Lord 2024 taught us anything, is that Americans are absolutely fucking fed up. They're fed up with how everything runs in this country. They're fed up about being lied to. They're fed up about, it was coming from the left. Like, aren't you sick of all these rich people getting to do all the things that you want to do? Don't you want to tax the shit out of them? Yeah, us too. Join all of the rich people, apparently, to tax the rich people. That won't include them, but I don't know what other rich people we're going to tax, because we're saying we're going to tax the rich, but we're paying people to show up. It's complicated. So anyway, whenever it gets complicated, you can know that some shit's going down. And there's nothing less complicated, but more, complicated as the government goes than this situation right here. Like, yes, to the layman, to Fox News, like Dane said, to the CNN, like Dane said, to the Rachel Maddows, like Dane said, this is all about his gun trial. Everybody that watches MSNBC, or that's right? And then CNN, they don't even think about the laptop. That's not even in their fucking realm. Like, they don't even know what goddamn the Twitter files are. They have no idea about any of that. But they can tell you carte blanche about, Hegseth's fucking drinking problems and that he got into a fight with his mom once. Like, that's the problem. Like, you're not listening to us, and it's showing up in ways that aren't good for our society. Number one, Dane and I were talking about it, and we were kind of tossing it back and forth about whether or not we wanted to discuss the shooting in New York.
Of the CEO of, I think, United Health. Yeah.
Right. And we were going over, what we thought about it, and I'm sure Dane will have his say, but I just wanted to kind of carte blanche it, because whether or not you think it was a good thing or a bad thing that a CEO got shot, whether you think it's a good thing or a bad thing that a guy walked up to him with a silencer and popped him right in the middle of New York, on a busy street in New York, situations aside, what I saw that night, and Dane can agree or disagree, I saw an American standing up to protect, or at least elicit some justice that he thought that he was due, because a system was so corrupt that I'm sure somebody that he lost, or somebody that he knows that somebody was lost, caused him to do that, caused him to assassinate somebody. And and Dane and I were throwing it back and forth, I don't hold the CEO entirely accountable, but he is the figurehead for that business. And I think we can all agree that the health insurance, that medical, all that stuff, all those systems, I don't want to get into it because it'll take forever, but those are so broken and those are so not working. And the people that are supposed to protect us from those happenings that those corporations are getting away with, I believe he inscribed on the casings, deny, delay, and depose. That's their mantra. And that's they can only do that if they grease the right palms and it's legal enough for them to get away with. So what I'm saying is, the entity that's supposed to protect you from that is the government. Well, if the government's bought and paid for and overseeing something that allows a certain institution, let's just say Purdue Pharma instead of United Healthcare, who was ever held accountable for that? I believe that they went bankrupt and they paid off $8 billion when they sold heroin to literally heroin to people that was killing people and getting them addicted, and nothing was ever done about it. This young man took matters into his own hands because the system is broken and no one up on Capitol Hill is willing to fix it. So this is a warning shot, literally, for these people that think that they can just get away with anything. Eventually, if the system is broken, people will start taking matters into their own hands. And that's the scary thing. That's really what when you gaslight people long enough, and when you talk down to them long enough, and when you insult them long enough, and when you do shit like this, like pardoning your goddamn son for, not for defamation, but for potential treason. Fuck the crack, fuck the hookers. I'm sure he did that plenty. That's all null and void. That's Epstein Island, and the girls were, taken advantage of. Yes, they were, but that's not the story. The story is that he had fucking WhatsApps from the CCP member saying that his dad wanted the payment. That's a fucking huge red flag, and he's never going to get held accountable for it, and none of them ever will. If you thought Nancy Pelosi insider trading was a big deal, this is huge. And if you think people are going to take this lying down, this is no call to violence, by the way. Absolutely no call to violence. But this is how you make a toxic fucking Molotov cocktail of a country. And they've done it exceptionally for the last 12 of 16 years. And now it looks like things are coming home to roost. And I hope it doesn't go ass-shaped. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. And the only thing that I would add to that is, David and I are fathers to young children. So in terms of the timing of societal collapse happening, not ideal for us. Okay. And nobody that is, sane, we pride ourselves on cultivating the sane space, is wishing for revolution, is wishing for civil war, is wishing for rampant, unchecked violence in the streets. That's just not something anybody wants. However, what I think David's saying, which is what I agree with, is when people are screaming out to you and the only thing you do is turn your back to them, you are inviting them to take the last resort that they have. It doesn't mean that those of us sitting on the sidelines are cheering that that resort was taken. We're not taking delight in the death of somebody who had young children of his own. We're not, saying that even though he might be the CEO of a company that denied a bunch of claims and he made multi-million dollars a year for his job, that, he should be the one that bears the sole burden of the entire system that crushes the average man's life, over and over again to the tune of millions of people a year. We're not saying that any of that is justified, but we are saying to those in power that, once again, I'll just reiterate, if people are screaming out to you that something is wrong and the only solution, or not even solution, your only response to that is to continue to turn your back and plug your ears, you're leaving desperate people with no choice.
You're lucky if you just lose an election like you did.
Yeah.
You're lucky if you get that.
Like we made this point about just Democrats in general, is that love or hate the people that support Trump, they have legitimate grievances. When they say, hey, my family's on life support, or, both sometimes literally and financially, and you're sending billions of dollars over to fight this war in Ukraine that does nothing for American national interest. Why are you doing that? And that's a legitimate beef. And if that person leads them, if that belief leads them to say, well, I think I'm going to vote for Trump because he's talking about ending that war, and your response is to call them deplorable or, any other manner of disrespectful name, or take a disrespectful tone with them and pretend like their grievances aren't legitimate and their concerns aren't worth taking seriously. If that's all your response is to these people, you're creating the radicals that are doing things like this. So again, you talk all this stuff about peace and coming together and hearing the other side and all of that kind of stuff. Well, if you're the elected representatives for all of us, that means that you're the elected representatives for all of us. That means you can't completely just dismiss an entire half of the country because they like the wrong candidate. Because again, the more you do it, the more you invite actions like this, which nobody is, particularly enthused about. So,
yeah, I just saw the overlap in between the two situations, and again, if it's just that it's that old, it's the way the feudal system worked. Like the king was the king until people were starving. Until he wasn't listening to the people, then eventually the people reminded him who really had the power. And that's the problem. We don't want to do that. We want to live in a civilized society. We want to I don't know, get the service rendered that we pay for, especially if it's life-saving. And if you create this cacophony of just, it's inhumane on all fronts. And you don't really care because you're making money. Kind of like war. Kind of like starting a war to make money on human death and suffering. That's pretty fucked. And people are saying that, but you're calling them deplorable. At the same time, it's this upside down world. It's like, listen, justice is going to be served one way or the other. And I just hope that it's served appropriately in the society that we've built and not a weaponized DOJ, as we've mentioned before, but an actual DOJ. Let's get back to some actual holding people accountable for things that they do. That would be nice in this week of forgiving somebody for being a complete fucking asshole his entire life. And the one moment he got to have his chickens come home to roost, daddy swoops in to save him because he's really saving himself at the end of the day. Like that dog ain't gonna hunt. Sorry.
Not a good look.
Anyway.
So
Nope. With all that being said,
yep.
Dane, where can they find episode 223 of Weapons of Meme Destruction Podcast?
You can find this episode at wmdpodcast.com/223. They can also find the audio only on any podcast catcher. Just search Weapons of Meme Destruction, and they can get the video on YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey, and X. While you're over at wmdpodcast.com, make sure to join the email list so you always stay in contact with the show. Check out the Support Our Work tab at $5, $10, or $15 a month of recurring support, or you can click the one-time donation and donate any amount you want. $1, 1 Bitcoin.
Make you holla.
Anything in between that, even higher if it pleases you. And, other than that, if you...
We're all about pleasing you. We're all about...
You can also
pleasing
donate
you with
Bitcoin
our mouths.
to us at our wallet. But with that being said... times are still tough. Hopefully not for much longer. We hope that for all of us. But
it's not if you have Bitcoin. Hey, call back.
It definitely is not. But if money's a little bit tight, we always appreciate the free ways to support the show, which is like, subscribe, share everywhere you see us, even on platforms that maybe you never ever go on. Rumble. That's fine. Just type Rumble into your browser once and go search us up and hit the subscribe button over there. Even if you're never going to watch us there, it helps the show. But anyway, like, subscribe, share, jump in the comments on the platforms that you do use regularly. And other than that, just tell friends and family about us. Help grow the Sane Space by word of mouth, one at a time. That's the best way to do it. Just ask the hookers that serviced Hunter Biden. And with that being said, David, let's see him next week for 224.
If the world's not gone yet, we certainly will. And until then, guys, stay safe. But more importantly, stay free.